Hello, and today we're talking about a bottle of whiskey that costs £125,000. It's the oldest malt whiskey in the world. This is Cask to Glass, the whiskey podcast, where we examine the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. Let's hear more from Stephen Rankin of Gordon and MacPhail. Stephen Rankin, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
It looks a nice outlook behind you. Before we get cracking, how do you take your whiskey?
Oh, goodness. Well, that depends on the whiskey. I'm a great one for just, first of all, having a nose, and then a little taste, and then, if I think it needs it, I'll put a couple of drops of water in. So, just get the whiskey to the right balance. Whiskey's a very individual thing. It's all about the person drinking it.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? It's all about the person drinking it.
Well, we're all different. I stand up at events and I look around the room and I never see the same face. And the thing is, when we're enjoying whiskey, it's very personal to the individual. So when we grow up, we develop a memory bank full of recollections or memories, a bank full of memories. And the shortest synaptic link in your body is from your nose to your brain. So when you smell something, what you're actually doing is recalling a memory. That memory could be, well, think of it as us in Scotland when we're young kids. You're out on your bike, it's been a baking hot summer's day, which are seldom, but when it happens, the rain comes, and that incredible smell of that hot tarmac and the rain off the tarmac, or the smell of your mum's cooking, the smell of your granny's baking, or you're on holiday and the smell of the markets, or all these things, they all create smells. It could be, or even specific things that you enjoy when you're putting marmalade on your toast in the morning, and that combination of smells, it all goes into your memory banks. So when you're sitting enjoying the whiskey, what's happening is your nose and your palate are all working as one. And your brain is trying to look for what is that indicator that I'm now getting, and what does it taste like? And it can be anything. It could be the type of confectionery you grew up enjoying. John, probably back in our day, it was things like Parma violets and mint humbugs and, licorice torpedoes and this sort of stuff, and with sour plumes and things. And so your brain's looking for some of this. So, and of course, whiskey's a global thing. So it's going to vary across continents and from the different people. So what's really fascinating is when I present a whiskey to somebody, it's a talking point. It's not a lecture about this has got X, Y, and Z flavors in it. It's going to be slightly different to everybody. What you do point out is maybe something that's specific to you that might give people sort of a clue and unlock those memories, because in amongst this incredible spectrum of flavor will be elements that they'll detect maybe slightly ahead of other people, or they'll translate as something different. Now, of course, today we enjoy whiskey in so many different guises, from regular sort of blends, for example, that might be the lowest legal strength for whiskey, which is of course 40%, up to cask strength whiskies, which sometimes can be as high as 60, 61, 62%. So, and of course, in amongst that, there's lots of different ages, and of course, nowadays, lots of different cask finishes, or even wholly matured whiskies. So yeah, they're all going to have something different. So therefore, the individual will probably get something different. So what's the marvelous bit about whiskey is that there's one, it's a commonality, and that's what we're sharing. And two, what we get is the conversation. One, the conversation you and the whiskey are having, but secondly, the conversation that you then can have with the people around you as you share this wonderful drink.
Well put. And the reason you and I are talking, we have met before. You reminded me that we met on a boat. That I was playing in at the time we rock band, and you kindly took my wife and I out on the boat with other people, lots of other people, out from Tarbert. We had to go back in because somebody was feeling sick, not me. The reason I'm talking to you today is that you've just announced, or every single, bit of whiskey press has this 125 decanters, the world's oldest. You're just releasing the world's oldest single malt, am I right? And it's 125,000 pounds a pop. Just give me an idea as to where that all came from. That idea, what's happening?
Well, it's a really great question, and it's people seem to almost seem to have a notion that there's sort of a collection of casks that sit there almost untouched, uninterrupted, maybe hidden somewhere, that one day somebody goes and opens and goes, oh, amazing, here's a whiskey that's drinkable and it's really fantastically old. But in reality, it doesn't quite work like that. So, but this whiskey is an incredible story, and if you indulge me just a moment. So Gordon MacPhail was established back in 1895. James Gordon and John MacPhail, the title bearers, founded a grocer's store. And the quiz I like to say is, so many great brands that we know today came from grocery stores, grocer merchants. John Alexander Walker from Kilmarnock, Johnny Walker. Arthur Bell in Perth, Bells. Matthew Gloag, famous grouse, Perth. The Chivas brothers from Aberdeen. Robert Graham from Aberdeen. The list goes on. The George family all started as grocers and expanded to the point that their brands overtook the scale of the grocery business, and it fell away. Gordon MacPhail took a slightly different path. As a grocers, we shipped fine spirits and wines from around the world. In particular, probably one of the most popular drinks in the UK was sherry, and we shipped lots of sherry in cask from down in the Sherry Triangle in the south of Spain, all the way up from places like Cadiz and Santa Maria up to the northeast of Scotland to Elgin. Those casks were emptied, of course, and the sherry bottled, and we had wonderful big vessels, which, given our location in Speyside, we had a lot of family businesses distilling spirit around about us. So we would give those casks to the local distillers and request them to fill it with new make spirit. This was a practice that we still carry out until very, very recently, in fact, just last year, and where we hand select our casks and give them to distillers, and in a relationship of total respect and very much integrity and openness, we then bottle those casks when we believe that spirit is at its peak, to complement what the distillery offers and not compete. Now, this is a great example of those partnerships in practice. It was on the 3rd of February 1940, with the grey skies of war slowly growing darker over Europe and ultimately the world, that two families entered into an engagement, which was the transition of passing over casks that had contained sherry, lovely big sherry butts and hogsheads, that were then passed on to from John Urquhart, who was my great grandfather, to Captain Bill Smith Grant at Glenlivet Distillery. The spirit was made with the last harvest that was to be made in peacetime Britain, before obviously we had 5 and a bit years of war. And so it was really quite remarkable, especially when you think about the Highlands and the amount of men that would have left these farms and distilleries to go off and join the cause. But two families effectively entering into this incredible long-term relationship when we didn't even know what flag would fly over our country. We were just about to witness the British forces being pushed right back, of course, to the edge of Europe and be rescued by thousands of small boats, hundreds of thousands of men. And then, as Churchill said, a great number owing so much to so few in the Battle of Britain. So it was an incredible time. Yet this was an act of hope and optimism, and because these casks weren't filled to be bottled in the immediate future, these were filled and selected rather to be filled in very much the long term. John Urquhart, by this point, already had 45 years of experience because he joined the business when it opened its doors in 1895. His son George, i.e. my grandfather, he managed to persuade his dad to leave school at the age of 14 in 1933. And so as he approached his 21st birthday, he already had almost 7 years experience of working in the business. So when he was himself to be conscripted into the Seaforth Highlanders. So this cask was then, again, it was selected because it was a big sherry transport cask. These casks are very different. It was made of an American oak because it's just a little bit tougher and tighter. The grain is much, much tighter. And the staves were made to be much, much thicker. And again, it was there to withstand the rigmarole of being, rolled around quaysides and platforms before going on boats and trains and the like, and ultimately end up in the far north of Scotland. And so it was really quite a remarkable feat. And of course, at the time, it provided the distiller with three things, really. One, an income for the spirit, a much, much needed income. Now, there was a lot of pressure on because the Ministry of Food had just announced that it was going to be tailing or rationing the amount of barley that could go to distilleries. Or in the lowlands and grain distilleries in general, they were all getting less. Most distilleries in 1940 got at least a third less, but Glenlivet, where this was filled, got 2/3 less. Now, that ultimately was, by 1942, the Ministry of Food was to cancel all barley and crops going to the distilling sector. Some distillers managed to hold on to their stock and make the whiskey through the winter months when there was plentiful supply of water, but distillers liked to do it in the colder weather because you got a better reaction with the copper, creating a more refined spirit. But certainly by 1943, nobody had anything, and there was only the tail end of that last harvest that was being distilled. I think a couple of distilleries ever made anything in the early 43. Nothing in 44 was made, but then Churchill realised that whiskey was a great dollar earner and started diverting crops back to distilling. There's records of just some distilleries making something in 45, but sadly the pressures were to continue, and rationing lasted right the way through to 1954. Now, as you can imagine, now these distilleries, as men came back from war and were looking for their employment again, you found yourself in a situation where you didn't have an awful lot to distill. So therefore, to stay in business, you had to go to your reserves, your stocks and your warehouses. And of course, following Churchill's great order of whiskey being a great dollar earner, and to help the balance of trade and the war effort, because effectively it was buying military equipment and the resources to build such, they found themselves emptying their warehouses. So there was a real lack of quality spirit. Now, what makes this whiskey incredible is this cask survived all those pressures and quietly slept on. And if we think about the 85 years this whiskey's been through, it's not had the effects of political, social, or sort of macroeconomics pressed upon it because of, one, the type of whiskey in the cask that it was laid down into, but secondly because it was a family business that owned it, and therefore the family that had at its heart a long-term vision, which was about, and a very simple single mission, which was to create whiskies of fantastic quality. And this whiskey was laid down by John and his son George, and it was there for the long term. These men, especially John, knew he would not see this cask come to fruition. George maybe thought he could have, but George was to have 4 children of his own, all came into the business at various times, and he probably thought that they would see this cask finally come into bottle and be sold around the world. But let alone that it would be his grandchildren would ultimately end up bottling it. So amazing.
It's an amazing story, isn't it? And it takes you. My father-in-law was there watching the bombers coming in over Haddington when he was a wee boy in 40. So anyway, 125 bottles, 125 decanters, 125,000 each. Are they all sold?
Very large number of them are. It's an incredible reaction to this.
Wow.
I suppose to go back to your last question briefly, when we're maturing our whiskey, what you're doing is you're not leaving it in a corner of a warehouse in hope one day that when you open it, there's something left. Because if whiskey evaporates at on average about 2% per annum, by the time it's half that age, there's technically nothing left. And of course, all that time you're losing strength. Starting off at 63.5 roughly is the main what the industry feel at. So it's slowly going to be dropping, and once it goes below 40%, you certainly wouldn't be able to bottle it as a whiskey, or certainly as a single cask. You'd have to go and, of course, blend it with higher strength whiskies to create a higher average to be over 40 for your bottling. So it was what we're doing is we're laying down whiskies, and with the view that we'll bottle them when we believe they're absolutely excellent examples of that spirit and drinking brilliantly, we'll be monitoring them. And every time we take a sample, it's like taking a three-dimensional photograph.
Mm.
So if you mentioned your grandparents there, and it's quite interesting because your grandparents, your mother, etc., and your family, you'll have an album of photographs of you at different ages. Proud mum taking you first day at school, every year probably. And if you go back and look at that, that tells us what you look like at that point. With a whiskey sample, it doesn't just tell us what you look like, it tells us what your character was as well, what you tasted like. Now, every year, every time we take a sample, we can then compare that to the way you looked, same way as it would be looking at a photograph. So you find yourself being able to say, right, what is the evolutional state of this whiskey? How's it changed from A to B? And of course, once it grows older and you're doing that more often, you can A to B to C to D to E, etc. And you get that timeline of evolution in the cask. Now, but you don't need to do it just on one level, i.e. it's a solitary thing. You can look at it with all your classmates and see how you're all changing. If that's a cask of Glenlivet, Gordon and MacPhail have been blessed to fill with well over 100 distilleries in our time. So we're looking at it with Glenlivet versus a Macallan versus a Glengrant versus a Linkwood versus a Mortlach, all of similar ages or the same age, maybe even in the same type of cask. And we're getting that change in how does it compare and contrast, one with itself from its past, its rate of change, but also of its neighbours and its classmates. And you get an idea and you get a lot of learning as to how this is happening. And then you can apply that learning to all the other casks, coming behind it, and even you can look at if there happens to be anything older, and of course in this case there isn't. So it's at the forefront. So you can't sort of learn from anything that's gone before, but you get the idea, and it's by doing that you have a point. And now, if let's just say there is economic pressure, somebody said, look, we've got this opportunity, or we need to do something, we need to improve sales or whatever. Well, the answer is, there's other casks we can use. These casks are now so finite that they have a very specific purpose in life. They're drinking incredibly well, but we think they can reach, be a few years older and still be incredible. So that's what we're doing. And so this cask happens to have given us 125 bottles, of which number one is not an open sale. It's going to a charity auction. But the other 124 are for sale, and I think we've probably sold about 3/4 of those already. And it's only been out since last Thursday, so the 2nd of October. So really quite sensational. And the price tag, you're talking about one of the rarest, most historic, the scarcest, not just whiskies and whiskies in the world, but matured spirits in the world. I don't know if there's many other whiskies or spirits, because my spirits mature in the cask, that as soon as you take it out of cask, that's their age stopped. There will be older bottles in the world, but there won't be older matured spirit in the world. So it could be the oldest matured spirit in the world as well. And it tastes incredible.
I was going to ask, what does it taste like?
Oh, do you know what? Everybody who's had the opportunity to try it, and to put that into context, more people will have summited Everest this year alone than will ever get to taste this whiskey, never mind own it. So it's amazing.
I like my statistics. That's a good statistic.
It is, isn't it? There's something like 700 people, or maybe more than that, start off to summit Everest, and they tend to all do it in the springtime. And only about 60 to 70% of those people will ever actually reach the top.
Wow.
So
Who's buying it? I mean, I presume it's selling all over the world, is it?
yeah, selling it absolutely everywhere. Do you know what is really interesting? The people buying this are whiskey enthusiasts, of course, people with wonderful collections. There's actually people who own these, and they have a point to them, and that they will be opened at some point to share a moment. When we launched this in New York, and I had the opportunity to meet a wonderful gentleman who has, in fact, a number of people actually, who have really lovely collections, and he was telling me the story about how he had opened up our 75-year-old Generations decanter for the 75th birthday of his father, and shared it with the family, and they just had the most remarkable afternoon enjoying this, and it just heightened a really special moment for his father, but for the whole family, and 3/4 of a century, and they could share it in whiskey. It was beautiful. It was really emotional for him. You could see it. So there's one example. But we've partnered with the very, very talented and I suppose in her world, very famous Jeannie Gann, this really incredible architect. And what she's created is just beautiful. It's a work of art. It's a bronze sculpture that cradles this bottle, this lovely decanter. And so people in the art world are looking at this and buying it. There's been a number of people that have stepped forward and bought one, and they very much are not in that centre core of whiskey. They enjoy whiskey, yes, but the reason for buying it is one of the historic, momentous nature of it, the fact that it's the oldest whiskey, but very, very strongly because it is an object of art, and it's just beautiful. So it's again, it's horses for courses, and lots of people have different reasons for it, and we have had inquiries for people who would like to buy it because they want to share it with their family members who happen to still be alive from 1940. So it's incredible.
Yeah, great story. And I've been all over your websites since I knew I was talking to you, and you have a lot of, fairly pricey whiskies, nothing like the 125,000. But you also, I mean, and there's this history behind your company, and you've been involved in that history. But you've also got your own distillery now, haven't you? How long's that been up and running?
Well, we've got two actually. So
Two.
we've got Benromach Distillery. Benromach Distillery was actually first built in 1898, and it went through the turbulence of the whiskey industry over the next 100 years. In fact, in its case, under 90 years, because in 1983, when Scotland lost a third of its production due to the economic times and overproduction, etc., the Great Whisky Locks, Benromach was one of many to close. Most distilleries either changed purposes, many were flattened and other things built in their places, or converted into things. Benromach actually was just mothballed, and over time, certainly the next 10 years, most of the equipment, etc., was repurposed from it. In 1993, after many, many years of trying to buy a distillery, Gordon and MacPhail finally managed to persuade United Distillers and Vintners to sell us the distillery. And at that point, though, there really was just four walls and a roof left, and some of the outbuildings and structures of them weren't great. And so, but it was at that moment we started to realise a dream. It was a dream that John Urquhart had. So my great-grandfather, he wanted to own a distillery. Gordon, if you think about it like a clock face, if 12 o'clock or a minute past 12 is the point you start distilling whiskey, Gordon and MacPhail took over from that point because we filled all our casks with spirit from over 100 distilleries with new mixed spirit. So wherever the clock gets to in terms of maturation, that's what we controlled all the way around to bottling, then distributing, selling it in retail, which we did ourselves as well as wholesaling around, to then ultimately getting it in front of a consumer for the bottle to be open, to be drunk. But that one bit is the bit we never did and we wanted to do, and that was to be in control of our own destiny and make spirit. So we very famously bid on Strathisla Distillery on the 15th of April 1950, when the distillery came to auction after its previous owner was convicted of various financial charges of basically not paying his taxes because he was selling a whiskey on the black market and not paying duty, etc. on it. Because at that time in the world, in the late 40s, whiskey was a very prized commodity. So anyway, we missed out on it, is the bottom line. And we find ourselves in a situation where the opportunity to own a distillery presented itself in 1993. Took us 5 years to then drop all the architect's plans, get our friends at Forsyth's, another family business from Speyside, help design the actual distilling equipment and stills, etc., and put it into practice. And then we started distilling in 1998, and at the time it was Prince Charles came and did the grand opening.
Yeah, you opened it.
Yeah, so it's 27 years this year since Glenlivet opened. And as a very small distillery, we were only making about 130,000 litres a year to start with. To give you an idea, most people are making that in a day nowadays. Had these big distilleries, Glenfiddich's, Glenlivet's, Macallan's, etc. So, and we've increased over time, but we're still only just about 500,000 litres, which is, these guys are doing that in probably just over a week. So it's still small. Now, the thing about it was, being so small, what was our point of difference? Well, being Gordon and MacPhail, being a business that had these records, these samples going back, we realised there was a very distinct hint of a difference in spirit from before the 1970s. And that was this very subtle hint of smoke. Now, in this 1940, 85-year-old whiskey, there is this subtle hint of peaty smoke as well. Because back then, especially through the tough times, you used whatever fuel source you can. One, you were direct firing your stills, so that coal or anthracite or timber peat going into your stills was creating a really smoky atmosphere. And we all know, having stood at barbecues and next to smokers, smoke clings to your clothes, clings to everything. It really creates this smelly and it's very strong aromas, and it takes a long time to move them. So that was in the atmosphere. Also, these distilleries would have been doing their own maltings on site, so you would have got the fuel going onto the fires to dry your barley in the malting process, and of course it would have added into smoke. So again, that would have just lasted. So with Benromach, we went and created that sort of lost smoke, that tiny lost smoke of Speyside. And what's amazing is it really does stand out. But the other thing about it is, when we built the distillery, we deliberately did it so that everything was going to be done by hand. So our real points of differentiation are, local source barley, milled on site. The wash then has, or the wort has 2 types of yeast that goes into it to create all these wonderful flavours. And then we've got smallish stills, but we create a sort of more medium-bodied, fruity character whiskey with this lovely touch of smoke to it. And then we only ever use first fill casks. It's first fill sherry and first fill bourbon. So that's a real point of difference. And we're really proud of it. And so far, I think even in the last 10 years, we've won something like over 104 major medals for the different styles and ages of Benromach that we have. So that's really amazing.
But I know today there's a big whiskey charity day, isn't there? A big function you're going to. And I guess that's, when you're involved in the world, you've got to do good, haven't you? You have to. There's no point just keeping all the money for yourself. So you guys today will raise a lot of money for charity. And over the years, I think I saw you've already put 7-8 million, is that right, into charities?
The charity, yes, it's the Worshipful Company of Distillers, one-of-one auction. The industry all get together and create amazing, incredible one-off editions, and sell these at auction to a global auction. While it happens in one place, it all goes online and on telephones and all the rest of it, all around the world. So today it's 4.3 million, equivalent to about $5.35 million. And it all goes to the Youth Action Fund, a Scottish-based charity, which is there to support disadvantaged young people get on in life, which is fantastic. The people behind it are great, and it's the industry's way of paying forward. You could say paying back, but this is really about the future of people. So it's very much about paying it forward. And the same, the charity that are the one of one, the decanter one of 125 goes for. And it's about paying it forward as well. It's about future legacies. And that's what the whiskey industry at large is really investing in for this. So it's really good.
Yeah. Listen, I've been fascinated by what you've talked about. Thank you, Stephen. Before you go, your take on the whiskey world just now. Everything in the world is cyclical, whether it's property prices. American gurus will tell you property prices every 15 years have a crash. So we're due one now. We've had everything going up and down. And whiskey at the moment seems to be in a slightly quieter phase. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't just think it's whiskey. This is, to your point, everybody's just got less money in their pocket. It's just tougher all around. Luxury goods at large, that more discerning spend is under pressure. People are still enjoying whiskey, and we're noticing that because sales of our younger whiskies, and by that I mean anything, from say our 10-year-old Benromic up to our 21-year-old and the like, which offer great value and are sensational products. They're all selling well. It's the higher end, but at the higher end, it's interesting. People are just a little bit more conscious of their spend because there's more competition for that money in their wallet. But it's not just whiskey, as I say. It's watches, it's cars, it's everything, and it's really interesting. Everything that we've in the last 3 or 4 years that we've gone to buy has had substantial price inflation on it. If you think about your average shop, filling your car with fuel, and of course with interest rates going up and things, before you even start in your general spend, all your major outlays, your mortgages and anything that your borrowings on is gone up in price. So there's just less money. Now, therefore, when it comes to whiskey, we must ensure that we continue to offer a really great quality product, and that we're cognizant of where we are in the world. And we've taken some steps of that, where we've been offering some wonderful, wonderful products, but just making sure that we are respectful to the consumer and delivering in their mind and their mind's eye very good value for money, and things that they'd be proud to own and proud to drink, and that has meaning to them. So I think it's a challenging time, but do right by the whiskey and do right by your consumer, and everybody will get through this. And people who do have the money, they're just going to be a little bit more private and more discerning in how they spend it, a bit more conscientious in how it's seen. So they'll very much very much will carry on doing what they enjoy doing, but they'll just be a little bit more discreet about it. So,
Stephen, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Brilliant, John. Thank you so much indeed.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives? We're never going home. Never going home. All it took was one sip of the water of